sisters, we look at this picture and we think of the great exodus of Moses, who led the flock through that sea. And we want to bring a post tonight that will describe some of the important aspects of what the Israelites went through, and particularly one aspect that held back the great majority of those that left Egypt to arrive in the promised land of Israel. The post tonight that we're going to do is called The Sealed Fate of the Israelites, Murmuring. What we want to go into is how the murmuring of the Israelites was the downfall that set apart the two adults over 20 years of age from the mass amount of people. So this post is primarily dealing with the fact that murmuring today, especially amongst us present truth believers, those who proclaim the Elijah message to the church today, this will be a good review and topic that we should seriously consider, because there's so much murmuring today amongst us. So we'd like to start that post now. In the story of the great exodus of Moses leading God's people out of Egypt, we look back and see the great sin of murmuring. As we know, the Lord time and again did great and miraculous things in front of their eyes, yet still that did not remove their spirit of unbelief. Oh, how sad. But what is just as sad is that today this spirit is still very much alive and has taken root not only in the SDA, but also the DSDA, Davidian Seventh-day Adventist. We, as present truth believers, as we should know, have been given the highest and brightest light on the planet. The scriptural truth known by us cannot be surpassed, yet Satan and his angels, through their wiles, have led some of us to do the very thing that caused our Lord to reject his people of old, murmur. Let us review that first Exodus, and we shall quote from Numbers 14, verse 2 to 4. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land? To fall by the sword, that our wives and children should be prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, Let us make a captain, and let us return to Egypt. Numbers 14, verses 2 to 4. Here we see clearly that the people had rejected God's leader, thereby rejecting the Lord. As we continue to read the sorrowful story of these people, we realize that there survived only two adults over the age of 20 that made it to the promised land, Joshua and Caleb. So all of us should know the ramifications of unbelief as exposed by murmuring, right? You would think, but as we open our eyes and ears today, we realize that this same murmuring has not changed or disappeared among us. Let us look at two current examples. What we did is, in this post, we comprised two examples that we wanted to show you of murmuring today amongst us. And the first one we did is concerning a Brother D. It goes as follows. Brother D is a long-time believer in the Lord's rod. He has studied it well for over 30 years. He prides himself in knowing the ins and outs of the prophecies as expounded upon by our last prophet, Victor Hodoff. Sister H is a fairly new member to the message of the hour. She is still studying it and is learning it well. Seems quite devoted to knowing it further. Yours truly has supported her in her efforts to get materials, books, tracts, etc. we've sent her. We found out that Brother D, the one with approximately 30 years of experience, had some phone conferences, studies, and we began to listen in. Very well done, we thought, despite our disagreement in some of the points presented. So we invited Sister H, our new beginner, to come and listen. Soon, Sister H was thrilled to listen to the studies. She later requested to speak to Brother D, and they soon did. The subject of tithes, as we all know, is very important. And during their conversation, this subject had come up. We had given Sister H good, helpful advice and material, guiding her to the fact that despite our financial condition or circumstances, we must not neglect our tithes. Apparently, our long-time present truth believer, Brother D, has other ideas. He led our sister to understand that the current main organizations are not doing the right things and are therefore unworthy of our tithes. In other words, he is telling her basically, just hold on to them and do as you think is right. He was influencing her to not be faithful in tithe paying due to what he perceives as wrongdoing, not doing this right or the other. Murmuring and then exalting himself is a personal dispenser of the tithes. Oh my, shades of Korah, come back again. This is exactly opposite of what the message teaches us, as seen in the Lord's Rod, question 98. We'll go into this question a little bit because it really applies. But I wanted to bring this back to your attention, that this Brother D is a very smart man as far as the rod goes. He knows it well. He knows it. He's been in it for 30 years. And his phone conferences are very good. They're enlightening. As I mentioned before, we have some differences of some of the things he teaches. For instance, we disagree with his teaching of Ezekiel 9, the half-hour silence. He has a different take on that than we do. But we love the fact that he does try every week to bring the brothers and sisters together and discuss the latest present truth ideas and subjects and so forth. But what we want to show is that despite 30 years of being in this message, he still does not understand that we cannot go past the basics of the message. And we're not even talking about Davidian Seventh-day Adventist message here. We're talking about the standard SDA teaching, and that is that we have to pay our tithes. That's standard scriptural teaching, in fact. So this brother, like I mentioned before, has decided that the main organizations, and there's only 2 or 3, maybe 4 long-term main organizations that are producing the tracts, producing the charts, producing the several literatures of the message, he claims are doing this wrong and that wrong. And therefore, because of these wrongs, he has justified himself to no longer be responsible to pay the tithes to these organizations. In other words, what he's doing is telling the Lord, there's too much problems out there in the main organizations that have been producing the material and doing the work in the field. So I am entitled, Lord, to disperse the tithes as I see fit. Okay, now this is his stance on the tithe situation. Okay, let's now read what the message says in on question 98. And this can be found in Answer, Volume 4, page 46 and 47. The question is it my duty to set right the Lord's treasury? Question 98, answer. Here's the question. Should we pay our tithes to the storehouse if we know that it is not used rightly? Answer. Knowing that our tithe belongs to God's storehouse, our greatest burden should be to see that it is faithfully paid there. Nowhere in the Bible do we find that the Lord has laid upon any tithe payer the policing of channels through which these funds passed. Let me repeat that again. Nowhere in the Bible do we find that the Lord has laid upon any tithe payer the policing of the channels through which these funds pass. Continuing, the Lord's treasury is under His control, and if He Himself should not see fit to correct an abuse in the handling of His money, certainly we could not correct it, however hard we try. If we guard carefully that part of His work which He entrusts to us, our only concern will be to find out where His storehouse is, and then faithfully to deposit His money there. He has not made us responsible for its use. That He will personally take over, even as He is now taking the reins in His own hands. When the promised land was divided among the 12 tribes, the tribe of Levi received no land for an inheritance, as did the 11 tribes. Instead, the Lord decreed that the tithes of the other tribes were to go to the Levites. This was their inheritance. It was actually their own. And just as they, as the tithe receivers, had no right to dictate to the others, the tithe payers, what to do with their own increase after it had been tithed, so the tithe payers have no right to dictate to the tithe receivers what to do with the tithe. Each tribe was itself to be accountable to the Lord for that which He entrusted to it. Thus it must be today. Answer, Volume 4, page 46 and 47. So we see from the Elijah message brought to us by Brother Hodoff that there is no way that tithe payers have any right to dictate to the tithe receivers what to do with the money. What this answer truly shows us is that the Lord's watching what we do, not what the other guy does. And so it's very important that we do our part, which is to tithe our increase. And the message, if you'll study in the answer, I believe it's in Volume 4, it describes more about what is an increase. In other words, it describes a little bit more in detail. But basically, it's your increase from your expenses and so forth. If you're employed, you're driving to work and you've got gas and so forth, you're allowed to deduct that. And then anything above that, which is your net profit, your net income, is subject to the tithing. But so the main thing is that we do our part. We pay our 10% and our offerings. Remember in Malachi, the Lord accuses us of robbing Him, not only in tithes, but in offerings as well. Well, offerings are up and above the 10%. So we have to realize that this is not just 10% we're talking about here. We're talking about more. And of course, as the message tells us, there's no specific amount as far as the offerings go. It's up to each individual to place upon his heart what he feels is the correct way to offer the amounts that he feels. So this brother, no doubt, has convinced himself that because God's current Elijah message organizational leaders are not doing the right thing, he is justified to make his own house the Lord's storehouse. And again, the message straightens out in question number 97, same volume 4, and this is found in page 44 and 45. You see, one of the things about the Elijah message is that the Lord knew specific issues that would rise up. And that's why he sent the prophet to address these issues in writing, so that we can refer back to them and not get off course, not do things that are displeasing to the Lord. And we know that tithing is very, very important. And so with this tithe situation, this following question, number 7, addresses this issue about, can your and my personal home be the storehouse? There's a brother that many of us are well aware of that has a site, and he promotes to go ahead and publish the Shepherd's Rod message from your home and get all the material into your home. And so I suppose, he wants you to publish many tracts and so forth, so you can see yourself as a storehouse. You can do your own work in your community and so forth. And this is what the object of this brother is. But let's now look at question 97. Cannot my home be his storehouse? Question 97. Is it scriptural for one to retain and personally use his tithe and offerings in order to carry on the gospel work in his own community, according to his own plans? Answer. Nowhere in the scriptures do we find permission to use the Lord's money at our own discretion. Let me repeat that again. Nowhere in the scriptures do we find permission to use the Lord's money at our own discretion. The only justification for so doing would be the sheer inability, for some reason, to send it to the Lord's storehouse. Should one voluntarily, though, engage in such a practice, then he would set the wrong example before others. And if following his lead, others assume the same right, their course must inevitably result in seriously handicapping the Lord's work, bleeding and subverting his treasury, and thus disorganizing his work and reducing the church to a mere shell, while her members are hiring themselves as laborers in the Lord's vineyard, helping themselves to the Lord's money and running without having been sent. What a Babylon that would be. Through the Lord's commands, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, Malachi 3:10, he does not say to bring all the offerings. Thus, he shows that if we would engage in some personal charity or missionary activity, we should abstain it from offerings, not from the tithe. And he quotes Testimonies, Volume 1, page 198. Angels keep a faithful record of every man's work, and as judgment passes upon the house of God, the sentence of each is recorded by his name. And the angel is commissioned to spare not the unfaithful servants, but to cut them down at the time of slaughter. And the crowns they might have worn, had they been faithful, are put upon the heads of those saved by the faithful servants. So we see from this answer, question number 97, the prophet definitely tells us, do not use your house as the storehouse. And so anytime, brothers and sisters, you see somebody suggestion to you. Hey, brother, sister, you know, there's so much messed up in Davidia that I don't see why you should be sending your tithes out anywhere. Just go ahead and keep them. What you feel is right. If you have a donation cause over there and over here, and you know, keep the money at your home and do when and where you think it's right to do with the money, you can be sure that this is going against the Lord's final message to us. And that's why the purpose of this post tonight is to warn you that it's not your idea, it's not my idea. What we've got to do is the Lord's idea. And how do we find the Lord's ideas? We study His rod message. And His rod message is not hazy on the tithes. These question and answers can be found in Volume 4 and Volume 5 particularly, concerning the tithes. And once we know these, that's just half of the package. The other half is we put them into practice. We cannot, like James says, be doers of the word, not just hearers. So, one of the things that this brother D is showing is a strong sense of murmuring. Why? Because, like we mentioned, he's telling this young sister a very bad thing, and it's going against the rod message, the Lord's final Elijah message. So not only is he doing wrong, but he's telling people to do wrong. And this is really, really a serious situation. Do we really think that our murmuring today is somehow different, somehow excusable? The words of the Lord apply. I tell you no, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. Luke 13:3. Let us now look at our second case, and that is of Sister C. She is also a long-time professed believer in the message of the hour. She has been very active in the Lord's latest avenue of spreading His final message, and that avenue is Facebook. Over the years, we have noticed one unmistakable trait. That is that she neglects to post studies or other helpful, encouraging present truth, and instead she chooses to resort to criticizing and discouraging comments. Time and again, when our studies have been about tithes, she has always been the first to make comments condemning the main current organizations for their wrongdoing. Now, I will point out at this point that we as present truth believers know very well that there is three long-term organizations basically today that exist. And that is the Salem organization head by one of the original members, Don Adair, and it's the Waco organization, which is in Waco, Texas, and it's the Mountaindale organization, which is in New York. Now, we as administrators on a Facebook group called Truth Tellers advocate as our suggestion. We don't proclaim it as a must, but we do give our suggestions, and that is that we suggest that the tithes go to one of three places, and that is Waco or Mountaindale or International General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, which is based in Florida. And so these are our three recommendations. Now, some may ask, well, why aren't we doing Salem? Well, the simple fact is that we have a problem in a salvational teaching issue. And so we cannot support that organization because of that. But when we're talking about Sister C here, we would put our post up and we would make our suggestions, as I mentioned, and she would, in a millisecond, waste no time posting under our suggestions, well, Waco is doing this, and they're not the right organization, and they're been found wanting, and this and that. And then she would do the same thing with Mountaindale, and basically murmuring against these organizations. So when we saw that, what we would do was we would privately warn her in the chat message that she was murmuring. But she soundly rejected the idea that she is doing anything wrong. Just as Brother D did, just as Korah and his men as well, she exalts her own position and declares that she is entitled to dispense the tithes as she sees fit. After specifically being warned of this evil course, she has flatly rejected all counsel. We quote from Testimonies, Volume 3, page 255. I have been shown that the greatest reason why the people of God are now found in this state of spiritual blindness is that they will not receive correction. Many have despised the reproofs and warnings given them. Testimonies, Volume 3, page 255. Blindness is indeed Satan's handiwork. But what makes this especially sad is that these people are not ignorant of his last message. They know the rod, or at least should know it. This is a quote from one of the TGs. It says, there is a certain element whom even God himself cannot convince that he has taken the reins in his own hands. They never take orders from any but themselves. Such independent ones will continue to question and criticize, in which they themselves have no part. So regardless of their profession or what they think or say, they are not God's people. His real people, he declares, are able to take orders even from women and children. Timely Greetings, Volume 1, Number 5, page 20 and 21. Now this quote here is very important because one of the key signs to know that we are God's people is that we take orders. Now, if you look at the picture here we got of Moses parting the sea, each of those people took orders to cross the sea after Moses divided the sea with the power of the Lord. Throughout the trials in the desert, Moses kept giving orders from the Lord, and those that obeyed him were walking in the light of the Lord. But as we know, the rebellion became great. So too today, the Lord. Many people believe, and I hate to say this, but it's almost as if the Lord has abandoned the present truth work. And he has left a little Adam over here, a little Adam over there, and Adam over there, and we're just kind of meandering around. No, he's got complete control of the leaders of the work. He is instructing them. Yes, they are making some mistakes. However, are we going to be left with the alternative? Are we going to say, Lord, there's nobody that we should follow? We see clearly that it's all messed up, so I know you're with me because I'm just going to have to do the best I can and follow my own orders and do what I think's best. No, he has placed in positions of some of the mentioned head organizations his plans, and we have to fall in line. So the ability to take orders is very important. One of the other things that you will know from observing present truth believers today is how they react to a request, to an order, to something that you ask of them. Do they return your phone calls? Do they return your emails promptly? Or do they shine you on? I don't need no time for you. I'm too busy. Don't bother me. You see, when a person makes a request and wants to reach out and have a Bible study or do whatever, that's an order in a way. It's a request. It's a desire from them to help them out. And this is a sign or a clear indication that you are willing to take orders. You are willing to step in line. Myself, I'm, like I mentioned before, I'm a head of a big Facebook group, and I get private chat messages all the time, and they're requesting Present Truth material. That's an order to me. And as a person that believes in the message, I understand that my job is to take those orders and move on them, respond to them. And so in each of our certain walks, we're going to receive orders. Now, it may come as a request or this and that, but it's still basically an order. And we need to fall in line with that, because this humbles ourselves. This shows that, even as our Lord said, if you want to be great, you shall be the servant of all. So we take this message, and what we do with it is we say, Lord, this message isn't for me. It's because I learned it for another. You see, that's why we understand all this great light as Present Truth believers, is the fact that we have to take this light and be willing to use it and share it. If we take this light and sit on it, there's a fearful waiting something to happen if we don't wake up. So let's quote another quote from the prophet. It's found in another TJ, and it goes, "Who went into the promised land? All but the murmurers. Do you suppose that you can entertain the same spirit of murmuring and complaining, and in spite of it receive the seal? How absurd the very thought! How unfair it would be for a just God to destroy the disobedient of that day, but to save the disobedient of this day." What made one group eligible to cross the Jordan? It was their trust in God, knowing that He was their chief leader. They recognized Moses and Joshua as the ones through whom God was communicating with them. They did not look upon them as being anyone other than who they actually were. They were satisfied with their lot. They took orders as orders were given. So it was that they were the only ones who entered into the land. Timely Greetings, Volume 1, Number 7, page 12. So we see that Brother Adolf expounds upon the point that the only ones that did make it were the non-murmurers, the ones that, fell into line. Even though things weren't looking great, things were trouble, they were wandering around and they were having difficulties, they still trusted in the Lord. Same today. If you look out in the Present Truth world, organizations appear to be making this mistake and that mistake and the other mistake, and the murmurers step back and point fingers. Look at there. Now see that? That's wrong. Now look over there. That is wrong. What are they doing? They are accusing the Lord of having no structures whatsoever, except they themselves. You see how false this is? This is not right. We need to step in line and embrace people that are at the head of the work. The Spirit of Prophecy also describes in plain and clear words the results of murmuring. He wants to make us a people through whom He can reveal His grace. And He will do this if we only give Him opportunity. If we will open the windows of our soul heavenward and close them earthward against human rabble, against murmuring, complaining, and false doctrine. Those who murmur today against God-appointed agencies, weakening the confidence of people in them, are doing the same work that the children of Israel did. The Lord hears every murmuring word. He hears every word that distracts from the influence of those whom he is using to proclaim the truth. That is to prepare a people to stand in the last days. Christ Triumphant, page 121. So we can see ourselves, so if we can keep ourselves in check from disastrous evil habit, we shall be victorious as the faithful Israelites. In closing, my brothers and sisters, let us not be like the Israelites who question and criticize God's work. Their murmuring was their undoing. They did not survive. Let it be not our fate as well. You got a complaint? Put it in the right channels, and you have done as inspiration instructed. The results is God's hands. That's one of the most important aspects about complaining, fault finding, all these other things, is that when we have a beef against an organization, or leaders, specific people at the top, take it to them. Don't start spreading rumors and murmuring and saying, "Oh, I'm not happy with this guy, and he's doing that and this and that." Have you taken it to that individual yourself? This is what the word dictates to us as counsel. Go to them and put on your complaint. Now, once you've done that, you've done your job. It's in the Lord's hands at that point. And if that complaint, that beef you have against an organization or leaders or whatever isn't corrected, let it go. Don't sit there and dwell on it more and continue your murmuring. That's been the whole reason for this post, is to warn our brothers and sisters out there, the present truth believers especially, that if you want to take up this message and be a present truth proclaimer, be a faithful Elijah messenger, you've got to remember this basic trait, and that is that you fall in line with the headship and you don't murmur. This is going to ensure that you have taken the Lord's counsel and you're well able to follow through into the kingdom. So we hope you've been blessed with this post tonight. This has been placed on our hearts to tell you because we've seen so much of this lately that it's something that we needed to address. So let us close in prayer. Dear Father, thank you for allowing us to come together once again to spread the message that you placed upon our heart. May these people listening tonight realize that murmuring was a great offense to you, and you did not tolerate it in the days of old. So too today, you are a God that never changes. And to tolerate it today, when you did not tolerate it in the past, would make you a hypocrite. And how dare the thought. We ask now that you send this message to each heart and mind that is listened tonight, and may they fall in line with your truths. This we ask in the precious blood of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.